The noon light came through the glass walls of the 42nd floor of Halbrook, global in long pale stripes, falling across white marble and polished steel. Chicago stretched below in a silver grid, distant and orderly. Inside the executive wing, nothing was ever supposed to feel out of place. Every chair, every pen, every silent footstep on the deep gray carpet had been measured against one unspoken standard: control. Vanessa Halbrook stood at the head of the boardroom table in a cream dress with a soft V-neck, her dark hair loose on her shoulders, her hands resting lightly on a leather folder. On the wall behind her glowed a projected proposal for a cross-state merger, the kind of deal that could reshape the company her father had built over 3 decades. The investors seated around the table watched her the way people watch a storm they have decided to trust. Elias Voss, the senior partner, leaned back in his chair and offered a small, approving nod. In the private lounge adjoining the executive wing, a small boy sat cross-legged on a low cushion with a pair of dark, noise-canceling headphones clamped over his ears. Between his hands he held a wooden puzzle he knew by touch. His name was Leo Halbrook, and he was 7 years old. The caregiver had called in that morning with something sudden, something unsolvable, and Vanessa had done what she always did when the world failed to cooperate. She had adjusted the setting. Soft lamp. Familiar toy. Quiet therapist on standby. A door between him and the rest of the floor. For 12 minutes it worked. Then the fire alarm system misread a thermal sensor in the stairwell, and the entire floor erupted into sound. A high, steady shriek bounced off the glass walls. Red strobes began to pulse along the ceiling. Sliding doors jerked open and closed in confused intervals. Somewhere a printer stopped mid-page. Somewhere a woman in heels called to a colleague in a voice too loud for the space. Security radios crackled. Elevators chimed. The air itself seemed to hum. Leo tore the headphones off his head as if they had burned him. His whole small body began to shake in waves. When Andrea Pike rushed in, trying to soothe him with her practiced, cheerful voice, he pushed a low side table hard enough to send a crystal vase crashing to the floor. Splinters of glass skated across the polished marble. Dr. Bridget Cole arrived within seconds, asking the nearby staff to step back, using the careful sing-song tone she used with all her young clients. It was too late. Leo was already deep inside the storm. He scrambled into the corner where 2 glass walls met and pressed his back against the seam. His hands slammed against the panes, palm first, again and again. He covered his ears, then tore at them, then covered them again. His mouth opened in a long, ragged cry that was not language, not refusal, not defiance. It was pain without a shape. Vanessa came out of the boardroom at a run, her heels clicking hard against the marble. Elias Voss followed her as far as the doorway and then stopped, frozen in place, unsure of what he was looking at. She dropped to her knees in front of her son and reached for him, saying his name the way she had said it 1,000 times before. Her voice cracked halfway through. Leo flinched from her hand, as though it had come out of the wall and not from the woman who had raised him. He turned his face to the glass and cried harder. In that moment, the most powerful woman in the room became the most helpless. The Halbrook name had always been heavier than a name should be. George Halbrook had founded the company out of a rented office above a hardware store in the late 1980s. By the time Vanessa was old enough to sit at the kitchen table and understand the word quarterly, her father had built the kind of operation that filled 30 floors downtown. He was the kind of man who noticed a smudge on a boardroom window from across the room. He was the kind of father who praised a 96 on a report card and asked, with no malice at all, about the other 4 points. Vanessa had learned early that feelings were something you scheduled around. Mistakes were a luxury. A worthy heir did not fall apart in front of other people. She grew up inside that lesson the way other children grow up inside a house. It shaped her spine. It shaped her voice. It shaped the way she handled boardrooms and bad news and broken contracts. When her father stepped back at 63, citing health and a desire to watch the next chapter from a distance, Vanessa took the chair at 26. The business press gave her nicknames that were flattering and slightly cruel at the same time. She closed 3 mergers in her first 10 months. She sat across from men twice her age and did not blink when they tested her. But Leo was the crack her armor could not cover. He had been diagnosed young. The words had arrived in a pediatrician's office in a soft voice, the kind doctors use when they are trying to keep a room from breaking. Sensory processing disorder. Difficulty with emotional regulation. Possible overlap on the developmental spectrum. A long road, they said. Not a destination. A road. Vanessa responded the way she responded to every problem life had ever thrown on her desk. She hired the best people she could find. She bought the best equipment money could buy. She built a schedule like a cathedral. She believed, deep in the part of her that had been trained since childhood, that the right resources and enough discipline would close any gap. Bill Rell. What broke her was not Leo's condition. What broke her was the look in his eyes when she tried to hold him and he pulled away. What broke her was the therapist who could calm him in 12 minutes when Vanessa had been trying for an hour. What broke her was the night her ex-husband had sat on the edge of their bed and said, very quietly, that he could not do it anymore and had packed a single suitcase and left before sunrise. People in magazines called her the new face of the industry. They did not know about the nights she sat on the floor of Leo's room with her back against the wall, still in her work shoes, watching her son sleep after a meltdown, and wondering whether every careful, expensive choice she had ever made for him had also been, in some invisible way, wrong. In the chaos of the executive floor, one figure stood very still. Finn Calloway had come up from the 12th floor, where the building engineering office occupied a corner suite that almost no one in the executive wing ever visited. He was 29, tall, built in a quiet, grounded way, with dark brown hair cut short, and a jaw set by the kind of seriousness that does not need to prove itself. He worked as an independent contract technician, handling technical documentation and systems maintenance for a handful of corporate clients. He was only at Halbrook Global that day to drop off a set of revised schematics to a project manager who had not yet returned from lunch. His daughter's school had closed early because a pipe had burst somewhere in the basement and sent water through the kindergarten hall. There had been no one to call. So he had brought her with him, one small hand closed around his index finger all the way up the elevator. Bonnie Calloway was 6 years old. She was slight, with pale brown hair pulled into a slightly crooked ponytail her father had tied himself that morning. She wore jeans and a soft blue sweater and held, against her chest, a gray rabbit plushie with one ear that had been sewn back on twice. Her eyes were quiet. She watched the world before she reacted to it. When the alarm began, Finn felt her fingers tighten on his. He bent and picked her up without thinking. Her face pressed into his collar for a moment. Then she lifted her head and looked past him, across the marble expanse, toward the corner where the boy was crying. Finn was aware, in the way contract workers always are in places like this, that he did not belong to this room. His white shirt was clean but slightly wrinkled at the cuffs. His shoes were good leather, but they had been walked in. Among the tailored suits and crystal glasses, he stood out by being ordinary. He did not try to fix it. He had long since learned that trying to belong where you did not was a waste of energy better spent elsewhere. He watched for a long moment before doing anything. He saw the assistant step too close, too fast. He saw the therapist speak too many words at once. He saw a security guard reach for the boy's shoulder and then think better of it. He saw Vanessa kneel, and he saw how her nearness only tightened the knot. He had seen this shape of thing before. He did not move yet. A wrong move, he knew, could make everything worse. Bonnie leaned close to his ear. Her voice was barely a breath. "Daddy," she whispered. "He's scared like I used to be." Finn went very still. He lowered her to the floor slowly and went down on one knee so that their faces were level. She did not look frightened. She did not look curious in the way children sometimes look when watching another child break. She looked the way she had looked at the window of the funeral home 2 years earlier. She looked like someone who had already been there. He saw it all in a wash, in the space of a breath. The hospital room with the long, gentle beep. The smell of the disinfectant that had never really left his coat. The way his wife's hand had grown cold under his, while Bonnie stood with her forehead pressed against the bed rail, too small, too quiet. Every grief basket that had arrived at their door for a month afterward. The cupboard under the stairs where Bonnie had hidden for an entire afternoon after someone had slammed a car door too loudly in the parking lot of a grocery store. She had stopped talking for a while. Not completely, not all at once. But the small bright chatter of a 5-year-old had folded itself away. She would go silent at the sound of an ambulance. She would freeze when strangers reached for her. Some nights she crawled under her bed and stayed there until he sat beside it without asking her to come out. No one had taught him how to help her. He could not afford the specialists the pamphlets recommended. He worked a full day, and then sat up at the kitchen table half the night reading whatever he could find that was free and careful and honest. He watched other parents in waiting rooms. He asked questions. He failed and adjusted. The thing that had slowly begun to bring Bonnie back had not been clever. It had been the night he had sat on the hallway floor outside the closet door where she was hiding and said, very softly, "You're not bad. You're just missing Mom so much it hurts." She had cried for a long time that night. It had been, he understood only later, the first time she had allowed the pain to be seen instead of swallowed. He looked now at the boy pressing his back against the glass. He looked at Vanessa, her hands empty and open, her mouth shaping a name that would not come out right. He felt Bonnie's hand slip inside his. He stood up. He did not move toward the boy at first. He spoke first to the people in the way. "Could everyone step back a little?" he said. His voice was not loud, but it carried the way a calm voice does in a panicked room. "Give him space, please." Andrea Pike opened her mouth to protest. A stranger, even a calm one, approaching the CEO's son was not something anyone on her staff was authorized to allow. But she looked at Vanessa, and Vanessa looked up from her knees, her eyes wide and ruined, and gave one small, broken nod. That nod was the sound of a door quietly coming off its hinges. Dr. Bridget Cole hesitated, then stepped back too, which surprised everyone, including herself. The security guard retreated 2 paces and held up a hand to keep the rest of the staff from pressing in. Elias Voss stayed in the doorway of the boardroom, his merger forgotten on the table behind him. Finn crossed the marble slowly. He did not speak Leo's name. He did not reach out. He stopped a respectful distance from the corner where the boy was curled and knelt down. He lowered himself all the way, so that his head was not above the boy's. He rested his hands open on his knees, palms visible, a posture he had learned without ever being told that he was learning it. Then he did something that made the whole room hold its breath. He waited. He did not fill the silence. He did not offer reassurance. He did not ask Leo what was wrong, or tell him it was okay, or say, "Hey, buddy." He simply stayed. 6 seconds. 10. Long enough for the alarm, now silenced at last by a bewildered technician somewhere on the floor below, to leave behind a ringing so loud it felt like a second sound. Leo's hands were still pressed against his ears. His shoulders were still shaking. But the rhythm of his crying had changed, just slightly. It had a listener now. Finn spoke. His voice was low and steady and carefully soft. He did not try to make it pretty. He just let it be true. "You're not bad," he said. "You're just hurting too much." The words landed in the room the way a stone lands in deep water. Leo's cry did not stop. Not all at once. Not cleanly. But something in his body uncoiled the smallest fraction, the way a fist begins to open before the fingers actually move. His chest still rose and fell in ragged bursts. His back was still jammed into the glass. His eyes, swollen and red, lifted for the first time. They went past Finn's shoulder, then came back, then settled on his face. What Finn had said, he had not said to fix him. He had not said it to make him quiet. He had not said it because a boardroom of investors needed this boy to be convenient. He had said it because it was what no one else in the room had yet bothered to say. He had named the thing Leo had been drowning in. He had gotten the name right. Leo looked at him. Really looked. Something deep in him heard the naming and slowly, stopped thrashing against it. No one moved. Andrea Pike was holding her left hand over her mouth. Dr. Bridget Cole had one hand frozen halfway to her notebook, unable, for a long moment, to remember why the gesture had felt important. Elias Voss stood in the doorway, the way people stand in the doorway of a church they had not planned to enter. In the corner of the boardroom beyond, a projected slide still glowed uselessly against the wall, its careful graphs meaningless in the face of what the room had become. Vanessa had not moved either. Her knees were still on the marble. Her hands were still open. She was not looking at Finn. She was looking at her son. Finn did not press the moment. He did not lean forward. He did not reach out his hand. He stayed where he was and, after a few seconds, added, in the same low tone, "It's okay if you're not ready. I'll stay right here." That sentence changed the temperature of the air. It was so small. It should not have been able to carry so much. But every adult in that room had, without meaning to, been asking Leo to stop being in crisis. Please, calm down. Please look at me. Please be all right. Each well-intended phrase had been a small shove. Finn's sentence did the opposite. It said, "Take the time you need. I am not going anywhere. There is nothing you have to perform for me." Leo took a breath. It was shaky. It was not better yet. But it was his own. A long moment passed. Then, very slowly, the boy peeled his back away from the glass. He did not stand. He stayed low, the way small animals stay low when they are still uncertain. He looked at Finn again. Then his gaze slid past to the other side. Bonnie was still standing quietly behind her father's left shoulder. She was not staring. She was not frightened. She was holding her gray rabbit in both arms, and she was doing the one thing that, for Leo, mattered more than any adult word in that room. She was not asking anything of him. Her eyes met his for a heartbeat. She did not smile. She did not wave. She just kept being there, calm, unhurried, present. Leo crept forward on his knees. 2 slow paces. 3. He stopped an arm's length from Finn and bent his head and began to cry again, but it was a different cry now. Not the jagged, trapped shriek of before. A full, unguarded sob, the kind a child cries when he has stopped defending himself. Finn did not lunge. He simply opened his arms, slowly, halfway, and let Leo be the one who chose to lean. The boy tipped forward against his chest. Finn's arms closed lightly around him, light enough that he could have pulled away at any instant. Across the marble, Vanessa Halbrook began to cry without sound. The rest of the afternoon was a blur. No one in that room would ever be able to describe cleanly. Dr. Cole, recovering her composure, guided Leo and Finn into the dim-lit sensory room Vanessa kept outfitted on the executive floor, a quiet space with soft lamps and a weighted blanket folded on a low couch. Leo sat on the blanket with Bonnie's rabbit in his lap, because Bonnie had set it down beside him without a word, and walked back to her father. Leo did not speak. He did not have to. Vanessa gave Andrea instructions in a voice that was steady only because she had rebuilt it syllable by syllable. The boardroom was cleared. Elias Voss was rescheduled. The fire system was escalated to the building engineering team. The staff, still stunned, quietly resumed their work under Andrea's careful direction. Only then did Vanessa step out into the glass hallway where Finn was waiting, hands in his pockets, watching the city through the tall window. "Thank you," she said. Her voice scraped on the word. She tried again. "What you did in there." He turned. He did not say it was nothing. That would have been a lie. And he did not lie to soften things. "He's all right," he said. "For now. It'll come back sometimes. It comes in waves." She nodded. She was not sure whether she wanted to cry again or run out of the building. Instead, she asked the question that had been scraping at the inside of her throat for the last hour. "Where did you learn that?" Finn was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "From my daughter." He did not embellish. He told her, in the kind of voice you use when you are picking up a thing you still cannot carry in one piece, that his wife had died 2 years earlier. A rare autoimmune condition. A slow year of hospital rooms. The machines. The smells. The late-night corridor lights. Bonnie had been 4 when her mother was diagnosed and 5 when she died. She had been in the room. She had held her mother's hand. After the funeral, Bonnie had almost stopped talking. Every ambulance siren had made her drop into a crouch. Every sudden touch from someone she did not know had made her scream. Finn had not been able to afford the specialists the pediatrician had gently recommended. He had not had a savings account that could absorb a private therapist's rate. He had read whatever he could find. He had talked, quietly, to other parents in the pickup line. He had learned by failing. The night Bonnie had crawled into the hall closet and refused to come out, he had sat down on the other side of the door and stayed there until the house was almost dark. When he had finally spoken, he had said only, "You're not bad, you're just missing Mom so much it hurts." And she had cried for a long time, and when she finally came out, she had crawled into his lap and stayed there until she fell asleep. He told Vanessa this, the way people tell true things, without flourish, without asking for sympathy. The plainness of it was what broke her open. That night, Vanessa carried her son up the elevator to the penthouse she had bought the year she had taken the CEO chair. The view was extraordinary. The lights of Chicago spread out below them in vast, patient constellations. Leo fell asleep almost instantly, his cheek pressed to the shoulder of his pajamas, the weighted blanket pulled up under his arm. She sat for a long time on the floor of the hallway outside his room. She had always told herself that she was a good mother. The evidence was easy to assemble. The best school, the best therapists, the best toys, the best nutritionist, the best pediatric specialist in the Midwest. She had moved mountains to build a life in which Leo's needs were anticipated, costed, and met. Now, in the dim hallway light, she made herself look at those mountains again. She remembered the morning 2 winters ago when she had pulled Leo out from under the breakfast table by the elbow because they were late for an evaluation, telling him gently but firmly that he had to learn to face these things. She remembered the time she had said, "There's nothing to be afraid of," while every part of him insisted that there was. She remembered replacing 3 therapists in 4 months, because the progress reports were not arriving quickly enough for her taste. She remembered measuring her son's growth the way she measured quarterly performance. She had never, she realized, gotten down on the floor beside the fear and said its name. She had loved him. She had loved him with everything she was. But the shape of her love had been the shape of her work. Optimize. Control. Correct. Demand improvement. Iterate. Her love had been an operating system designed for outcomes. And a small boy in the middle of a meltdown was not a project with a quarterly deadline. He was a person drowning, and she had been standing on the shore with a stopwatch. The worst thing, she understood slowly, was not any single mistake. The worst thing was a quieter possibility she had never before allowed herself to consider. That every time Leo had lost control, he had watched her face, and what he had seen there had been disappointment, or panic, or the narrow flat look of a person trying to manage something. That he had learned to be afraid not only of the world, but of her reaction to his fear of the world. She thought of how he had flinched from her in that hallway earlier. How he had pushed her hand away. How he had let a stranger in a wrinkled shirt hold him without resistance, because the stranger had offered him something she, with all her resources, had never offered. He had offered Leo permission to be hurting. She pressed her forehead to her knees and stayed like that a long time, in the dark, alone, while her son slept a few feet away. No one in the world was watching her cry. A week passed. Then another. Vanessa made a phone call she had rehearsed 8 times in her head. She did not call to thank Finn again. She did not call to offer him a consulting retainer. She called to ask if he and Bonnie would be willing to come for lunch the following Saturday, on the rooftop garden above the Halbrook Global offices, when the building was quiet and the floors were almost empty. She said only that Leo had asked about the little girl with the rabbit. She did not know if that was true in words. It was true in the way he had kept Bonnie's plushie on his pillow for 6 nights running. Finn hesitated. He did not want Bonnie pulled into a world that might be too much for her. Then Bonnie, standing at his elbow in the narrow kitchen of their apartment, asked softly, "Is he still scared, Daddy?" And Finn said yes. So he said yes to Vanessa too. The rooftop garden had been designed for corporate events that were always perfectly lit and never really relaxed. On Saturday, in the bright soft air of a late spring afternoon, it felt different. The planters had filled in. The city hummed low at a weekend volume. Someone had set out a small low table with sliced fruit and glasses of cold water, and 2 cushions on the grass matting, and 4 folding chairs nearby at enough of a distance not to crowd. Leo did not come running. He walked beside his mother, half hiding behind her leg. He looked at Finn once, shyly, and then at Bonnie. Bonnie did not go to him either. She sat down on one of the cushions, opened a small tin of crayons, and began to color on a pad of paper. After a minute, she reached into the tote bag she had brought, took out the gray rabbit, and set it on the grass near the edge of the table. Not close to Leo. Close to the empty space between them. She did not look up. Leo watched the rabbit. Then he looked at Bonnie, who was humming very quietly while she colored. He sat down on the other cushion, not touching her, not speaking. After a long pause, he lifted one finger and rested it against the rabbit's one mended ear. Bonnie still did not look up. She just kept humming. Vanessa, sitting in a folding chair a short distance away, felt a warmth rise behind her eyes and did not bother to hide it. Finn, beside her, spoke under his breath. He said that many children like Leo needed to feel that they were the ones choosing the closeness. The more an adult pressed, the deeper they retreated. But when the room gave them room, they almost always stepped forward on their own. He said it as a simple fact, the way someone might report the weather. Vanessa watched her son touch a stranger's rabbit and said nothing at all. A month later, on the roof terrace of the penthouse at the end of an ordinary afternoon, the world reminded Leo that it was still a loud place. He had been sitting near the low stone planter with a small wooden train set Vanessa had brought out for him. The sky was a soft spring blue. The city's usual hum drifted up from below, steady and blurred. Vanessa had her laptop closed on the glass table beside her. For the first Thursday afternoon in perhaps a year, she was simply there. Then from the hospital 5 blocks north, a medical helicopter lifted off, and its rotor blades began to beat against the canyon of buildings between them. The sound came from everywhere at once. It bounced off glass. It echoed off stone. It was not loud, the way a siren is loud. It was pressure. It was physical. Leo's body went rigid. His hands shot up to his ears. His small chest began to heave. His eyes filled and did not spill. He was trying, she could see, to hold himself together in a way no 7-year-old should ever have to. Her first instinct was the old one. Scoop him up. Tell him it was nothing. Walk him inside. Close the doors. Shut out the sound. She started to rise. She stopped. She heard Finn in her head, not as instruction but as memory. Do not deny his fear just because he cannot say it in adult words. She knelt down on the cool stone of the terrace, the way Finn had knelt on the marble. She kept a respectful distance. She did not reach for him. Her voice, when it came, was uneven, but it was, for the first time in a very long time, the voice she actually had, and not the voice she used for the world. "Leo," she said. "You haven't done anything wrong. I know you're hurting. I know you're scared. I'm going to sit right here until it feels easier. I'm not going anywhere." He did not look at her yet, but he did not push her away. He kept his hands over his ears. The helicopter moved off toward the north, and the awful pressure eased, and Leo's shoulders began to fall, tremor by tremor, from the hard line they had carved into the air. And then, because she did not lunge, he came to her. A half step. Another. He leaned his small forehead against the curve of her shoulder. His weight was warm against her collarbone. He did not speak for a long time. When he did, his voice was so soft she almost did not catch it. "Mom," he said, "please stop being afraid of me." Her breath snagged in her chest. She wrapped her arms around him then, carefully, loosely, the way she had seen Finn hold him in a marble corner 6 weeks before. And for the first time in years, she cried not from exhaustion but from understanding. Leo did not recover in a month. He did not recover in 3. The world did not become quiet for him because his mother had changed. The helicopters still flew. The fire drills still went off. The supermarket lights were still too bright, and the crowd at the farmer's market still moved too fast, and there were still mornings when his shoes felt wrong, and no one in the family could say exactly why. But something had shifted in the house. Vanessa rebuilt her schedule. She did not resign. She loved her work, and her company needed her, and she was good at what she did. She rebuilt it anyway. There were days now that ended at 4. There were mornings that began late. There were therapy appointments she attended with Leo, not to observe, not to measure, but to be there with him. She sat on the floor beside the weighted blanket. She let him be the one to lean. She began to say things to him that would have sounded strange in her mouth a year before. "I know this is hard. You can take your time. It is all right to be mad. It is all right to be sad. It is all right to need the quiet room." The words felt borrowed at first. Then they did not. She also called a board meeting that surprised her executive team. She proposed a new program at Halbrook Global, a fund and support network for employees who parented children with developmental and sensory differences. Paid consulting hours with specialists. A quiet room on every floor. Scholarships for community therapy. It was not a marketing campaign. It had no catchy slogan, no banner at the entrance, no press announcement at all. It had, at her insistence, a strict policy that no family would be asked to share their story publicly as a condition of receiving help. She asked Finn to serve as a parent advisor. He hesitated. He did not want to be anyone's poster. In the end, he agreed on 2 conditions. The program had to prioritize families who could not otherwise pay. And his name would not appear on any fundraising material. Vanessa did not argue. Bonnie and Leo began to have a standing rooftop lunch on Saturdays. They did not talk much. They did not have to. Some days they colored. Some days they passed the old gray rabbit back and forth without ceremony. Some days Leo sat closer than he had the week before, and some days he sat farther, and Bonnie did not flinch either way. Leo's words began, in small, careful handfuls, to come back into the room. Not always. Not predictably. But enough that Vanessa learned to treasure each one without pouncing on it. One late afternoon, Finn stood near the rooftop railing watching the children on the grass. Vanessa came to stand beside him. She did not speak at first. Neither did he. The silence between them had begun, over the last few months, to feel less like a gap and more like a third presence, one they both trusted. She looked at him, finally, and what she offered him with her eyes was not a question and not a promise. It was a thank you so deep, it did not need a sentence to carry it. He received it the way he received everything. Quietly, without flinching, without asking for more than she was ready to give. Some wounds, she understood now, could not be fixed by power or money or the right method. They only began to heal when someone was gentle enough to see the pain behind the behavior and patient enough to sit down beside it instead of demanding that it disappear. The city shone behind them, enormous and ordinary, and for the first time in a very long time, none of it felt like something that needed to be managed.